If you are a small business owner, I'm sure sometimes you feel like you need a marketing degree just to successfully market your business. I'm here to tell you that is not the case if you use Constant Contact. Constant Contact's award-winning platform has powerful marketing tools to make it easy to grow your audience, engage your customers, and sell more. In just a few clicks, you can launch a campaign that is tailored to your business and goals. Maybe you're launching a new product, or releasing a newsletter, or want to tell your customers about upcoming deals. Constant Contact can help with all of that. This includes email, SMS, social media, and so much more, all designed to be easy so you can sell more, raise more, and fast-track business growth. Plus, Constant Contact's award-winning customer service is there for guidance along the way to help you with things like customer lists, templates, and follow-ups. Get going and start growing your business today with a free trial at ConstantContact.com. Constant Contact, helping the small stand tall.
Nah, we ain't taking that. We ain't taking that from the Brewers. I don't care how many L's we got this year. We ain't taking that.
From your favorite source for Chicago White Sox talk, delivering news, interviews, analysis, and more. This is the Sox Machine podcast with your hosts, Jim Margulis, James Fegan, and Josh Nelson.
Thanks, John. Thanks, Rob, and welcome to the Sox Machine podcast. That intro audio is from NBC Sports Chicago, as I'm your host, Josh Nelson, and it's Sunday night, June 2nd, 2024, as we bring you a new episode. The Chicago White Sox had an eventful Sunday, and it's funny how one play in baseball could generate so much excitement and emotion, as Tommy Pham was thrown out at home in the 8th inning to preserve the Brewers' lead. And we got some terrific sound bites from Pham and White Sox TV announcer John Schriffen. We'll visit those sound bites, as the White Sox have now lost 11 games in a row, and they're just 2 losses shy of tying the club record of 13 in a row. But while the White Sox had a bad weekend in Milwaukee, we didn't, as our tailgate co-hosted with our friends from the 108 and the Chicago Sports Bums withstood the rain and the cicada-infused malort to have a grand time. Now, the White Sox, after their day off, visit the Chicago Cubs for a 2-game series featuring 2 teams sliding backwards. So let's get started. Joining me are Sox Machine's beat reporter James Fegan and managing editor Jim Margulis. And hello, gentlemen. We are all in Milwaukee this weekend, so big shout out to our Patreon supporters. Again, thank you for your continued support. It allows us to send James on the road to cover the White Sox, and boy, what a game, what a series James got to cover, as the White Sox had multiple run leads in each game, but still lost each game, losing Friday 12-5 after leading 3-1. Lost on Saturday. That was the big meetup for Sox Machine, 4-3 in extra innings, and they lost on Sunday 6-3. But Jim, at least the tailgate was fun.
Sure was, despite the rain, despite just a nonstop drizzle that turned into a little bit of not quite, stop short of a downpour, but there were some stronger periods. But fortunately, we had enough tent coverage. A couple more tents seemed to pop up over the course of like the first hour or so that really helped out. And I think everybody was mostly covered. I think anybody venturing outside was maybe shifting, maybe going around to see what the beer selection was, or what new treats had popped up at various tables, making sure that nobody missed any offerings. But yeah, a lot of impressive job by the bums in terms of bringing the heavy machinery out for getting the grill up and going, and then continuing supply of just stuff. Helpful stuff, whether it's ice, whether it's beer or other beverages, whether it's dessert trays coming in. Every time I did a sweep around the perimeter, I kept seeing new things. So great job, I think, in the spirit of tailgating to just to keep the party going.
Yes, so shout out to Jason, him running the hot dog stand. He crushed it. Dougie with the smoked pulled pork. That was a huge hit at the tailgate. And Peter, the tents. Peter, thank you so much for those tents. 10 by 20 tents came in real handy. We had hundreds of people at the tailgate, as Jim mentioned, to cover them. during the rain. It was so much fun. Again, we'll have another big tailgate in Milwaukee in a couple of years when the White Sox revisit the Brewers. Because of the balanced schedule, the Brewers will be visiting the White Sox next season. And also a reminder, our next big event this summer is in mid-July in Kansas City after the All-Star break. More details about that meetup and that road trip will be on SoxMachine.com later this week. We have some cool things planned for that weekend. So if you have FOMO and you missed out on Milwaukee, you'll have another opportunity as we are meeting up in Kansas City in mid-July. Back to White Sox news. So, James, other than being a painful weekend for the White Sox in the win-loss column, and this losing streak extends to 11 games, it's also physically painful for some White Sox players. And that's my takeaway from this weekend. So many injuries. Andrew Benintendi.
Maybe it's been painful for a long time, up to 7 weeks.
Yeah, so let's start with Andrew Benintendi as he goes on the 10-day injured list with Achilles tendonitis. I didn't even know you had tendonitis in your Achilles heel. So what's going on with Benintendi?
It's Achilles tendon, basically his calf. He has apparently been dealing with this for 7 weeks. He initially said like a few months. And I said like spring training. He said like just afterwards. And apparently the last week and a half, it's been bordering on the level of unbearable where they would have said something. And apparently was bothering, he acknowledged the kind of silliness of that, he got pulled after the home run and makes everyone think he got injured homering.
I thought he retired. I thought he was going out up top, just like, yeah, I'm done here. John Crockett, maybe hit a milestone or something like that, and that's all he was playing for.
Well, that's the thing is that, I asked multiple times if this was affecting him offensively, especially since we had this conversation earlier about drift, which was him saying he had this tendency to get out of his back leg, which was to be his left leg, where he kind of needs to stay loaded in it to come forward with any power. And that's why he felt he was filleting everything or rolling over weakly. So it stands to reason, is it harder to kind of stay loaded in your back leg when you have Achilles tendonitis in it? And he pushed it aside a lot, and he made this funny quip like, my numbers are pretty good in June. Like I'm hot right now, because he's had one at bat in June and has a 3,000 OPS, or 2,000, whatever it is. But
4,000.
He did say, like, on the one hand, like, I've only covered Andrew Benintendi for like a year and a half. Like, I'm not staring deep into his soul, but like, he had the wrist thing all last year. He had a cortisone shot at the All-Star break. He'll acknowledge, like, I was healthy. I was able to like lift weights more this offseason. I feel like I'm stronger. It was sore, is tough to deal with, but he will not say like I had a bad year because like the wrist. So you have to take a little grain of salt when he says like, he's trying to say like, hey, I'm just not swinging well. I'm just not hitting well. I can't blame it on that, when he refuses to blame it for his offense. And also like, maybe it's something that's affecting him, but because he's not feeling in that moment, he's not qualifying as like, oh, I have diminished strength or diminished burst. He did say it outright that it's physically bothers him when he's been running the bases and playing defense. He doesn't get the good big burst of acceleration, the first step quickness. And I don't think anyone would watch and say that doesn't scan. His metrics tell the tale, and certainly watching him tells the tale of somebody like, hey, this doesn't seem like the same player that we saw in Boston or Kansas City, or, was marketed. And it seems like this makes sense. People were kind of joking like this was a conspiracy or a real injury since it just came up so weirdly, but his description of it matches a lot of the description of watching Andrew Benintendi this year. So I'm sympathetic to both that Benintendi, especially being a smaller guy, kind of feels like he has to play through everything or be this grinder personality where he doesn't acknowledge stuff. And I'm understand why coaches admire that tendency. At the same time, he put up -2 WAR in 2 months, clearly not playing his best. It seems like the kind of conversation about what's inhibiting him needed to happen sooner before someone who's wired the way he's wired is going to raise his hand and basically say like, I need to come out of the game, since he's acknowledging that he's been playing for this for 7 weeks, and then acknowledging he probably shouldn't have for a week and a half, and then still only when it became this next level of pain is when he tapped out. And that's kind of why athletes can't be their own self-diagnosis. Like, they got here because they pushed themselves. They're not going to stop. That's why you need to kind of be aware and take a more interventionist route, whether it's trainer initiated, the way Pedro kind of discussed this being, is that Kruk kind of was persistent in asking why something looked off, or whether it's more of a performance oriented where you say like, you're not right. Let's talk about why, and maybe some, early addressment before you accumulate the most negative value in baseball.
Yeah, Jim, I can already hear our listeners have P.O. Sox questions. Why do the White Sox continue to run into this? Why does this continue to happen? Because to James's point, he just said that James Crook has been asking, like, what is going on here? Something looks off. And then, as James just pointed out, Benintendi is on pace to beat Adam Dunn's worst WAR ever by a White Sox player. And now we will see on how long he's going to be on the injured list. But why does this keep happening?
Because they have no standards is, I guess, the snarky answer, but also they haven't shown better. Like, especially when it comes to veterans. We're watching it with Benintendi. We're watching it with Martin Maldonado. Last year it was the case with Tim Anderson and Yasmani Grandal to a certain extent. Although, Sebi got some playing time, but, they just, when it comes to Grifol, I don't know whether it's him still being afraid of, issuing accountability for veterans and maybe like issuing an ultimatum. And this doesn't even require an ultimatum. Just more a matter of like, hey, we have standards here. You're not performing to them. Why? I'm not going to take this public. Let's have a heart to heart. He can do the turn the chair around, turn his hat backwards, sit down, say, let's rap, let's dialogue. What's hurting you? Like a 90s school teacher, and just have it that way, and have it be a proactive thing, because the numbers are the numbers, and you can't have too much. We talked about this last time with Grifol saying you can't overreact over 2 months. And then, my thought was, that's typically what he says right at the moment he's about to do something. Deny, deflect, and then all of a sudden take action when it just becomes, it's beyond untenable already, but just, by his, level of untenable, then he acts and pretends like he was going to do it all along, or at least, had a real good reason for it. And, kind of strikes me as that, it only becomes a problem for Grifol, like, well past it being able to matter. And in this case, like, you can argue that nothing matters this season, but I think when nothing matters and when you have no red lines for underperformance, or in the case of, like, say, Maldonado, is somebody like, well, we don't care what catchers hit. And like, you have to kind of care what catchers hit just a little bit when the batting average starts with a 0. And not really being able to bring yourself to either criticize publicly, or at least, have those criticisms behind closed doors, or just those standards. Like, and it just seems to get away. And I think we're seeing like a cumulative effect of this. I think when you have all these sore spots that just don't seem to ever get addressed in a meaningful way, and meaningful being like playing time being affected, or 26-man roster status being affected, these things can, I think, snowball into something that they don't recognize what's happening until it's too late.
Well, on that point, so now make me mad, James. So Andrew Vaughn's got a sprained right finger. Didn't play this series against Milwaukee. Still not on the injured list. What is going on with Andrew Vaughn?
Probably he's going to get put on the IL before the Cubs series. They were still tossing it up in the sense that, they were told Grifol said they were told 3 to 5 days. Sunday was day 5, I think, or Sunday was day 4, or Monday would be day 5. But they're in like the back end of that range where like things are not progressing well enough to really have a lot of faith. But they hadn't reached what was supposed to be set to be the decision window yet. Like he was still feeling pain swinging as of Sunday morning, which is like not where they want to be to feel like they're going to beat a 10-day window. A little bit of the like hesitance, like they brought up Colas right away when Benintendi went out because they're already kind of playing a man down, and teams are a little bit reticent to like make a borderline call at the end of a road trip because they kind of feel like what's the difference a little bit. But the idea they were leaning towards is that Vaughn was going to go out as Robert came up, and thus kind of wave your hands of it because Vaughn's going out. Sheets is no longer playing in the outfield anymore, and thus Robert's kind of replacing him defensively, and it feels like a natural swap to some degree. It's a little bit complicated by the fact of like how badly is Dominic Fletcher hurt after what he did, because I think if Vaughn was healthy, Fletcher would probably be one of the top candidates to go down, simply because one of his, with Jolts is hitting, if Pham is, kind of entrenched daily, and Robert, obviously he'll probably get day off or two as they ramp him up. But if he's going to just kind of take over, be like an everyday center fielder, Fletcher's like opportunity to really contribute all of a sudden dissipates. But if he just straight up needs to go on the IL, and do you wait longer for Vaughn? Do you get another outfielder? Really, the only other move is just be adding Zach DeLoach, and with Oscar Colas already there, it's kind of like piling up this one shape of Tetra over and over again, and not really having like places to lock it in. They're just kind of running low in positional depth, where on the 40-man roster, where it's a little case of, well, what do we even bring up that like meaningfully adds to, like, figures into this position mix? But I think they were just mostly just thinking that they were going to swap out Vaughn for Robert if things didn't progress. And now they're just, as naturally it comes, more injuries pile up to deal with.
So Benintendi on the injured list. Andrew Vaughn could go on the injured list. Dominic Fletcher, the White Sox are waiting to see. Anyone else that I'm missing that got hurt over the weekend?
Braden Shoemake.
Braden Shoemake got hurt in Charlotte. Steven Wilson is eligible to come back before the Cubs series, and Pedro said he would. I think Dominic Leone is like a day or two behind.
I thought you were going to say Dominic Leone was a cautionary tale for Steven Wilson.
Yeah, very well could be. But both of them are on the road trip, so I think they're both really close. That would just be more bullpen shuffling, or, they kind of rode Justin Anderson surprisingly hard. Though at the same time, they also declared him as maybe their new seventh inning guy until Wilson is back, because Brebbia is struggling. And we interviewed Brebbia because we were just kind of like chatting with him, like, because he was the only reliever who ran in for the fight from either side, to point where, like, there's a point where we're watching the scrum and like multiple beat writers looking down, is like, is that John Brebbia? What is he doing out there? Because he's just like walking around without a hat. He's talking to some umpires. He's talking to some brewers. He just seems like he's making the rounds. And,
pressing the flesh.
But we talked in postgame about it, and he said, like, he obviously gave us a 2-run single today, but he kind of made this quote. Someone asked him about like the hit he gave up, and he just said, don't have any hard numbers or statistics to give you right now, but from the eye test, it certainly seems like it's happening a little bit more than normal in terms of giving up hits, which it's great post-game interviews around the clubhouse tonight. Very, very like concise, fully encapsulating an idea in like a sentence or two. Pham's going to take the spotlight, but Brebbio's right there.
Yeah, speaking of that spotlight, so let's talk about Tommy Pham. As he's down for fighting. This is what Pham had to say after Sunday's game.
1-run ball game, close play at the plate. And actually, it wasn't even fucking close. It was a shallow fly ball to left field. You would expect the left fielder to throw the base runner out on that play, but the situation of the game, third base coach sends you got to go. I'm nailed out at home by a mile. I'm going to the dugout, and I hear the tough guy with all the hoorah shit, so I'll never start anything, but I'll be prepared to finish it. There's a reason why, I do all kinds of fighting in the off season, because I'm prepared to fuck somebody up, so you can take it as what it is.
Now, James, Pedro Grifol, you got a chance to talk to him, and Grifol did like the aggressiveness in that situation. The White Sox are down 1, and it's kind of a shallow fly ball to left field, so Grifol didn't hate the send. Did Pham hate the send?
Pham seemed to have some sort of strategic differences with the send. Yes, it seemed like he hated the send when he basically said he hated the send post-game. It also seemed like he hated the send during the game, where you can see his path like change the inside part, where it's almost like he's realizing he has no like traditional route to being safe of like a hook slide around, because the ball is going to beat him so much that he seems like he's considering like a collision at that one point. And then he kind of gives like, he slides. It's like there's knees in it. There's a little bit of forearm, but it's not a takeout slide in any like, particular way. Like if anyone from 2007 saw this and saw us calling it a dirty slide, they would just think we had lost our minds. Like, it's almost like he kind of started angling himself to impact and then just realized like that's not something you can do anymore, and just kind of pulled up and made a normal slide. But I'm sure part of the thing is William Contreras saw him change a line that seemed very geared for contact, and was probably gearing himself for the idea that Tommy Pham was going to run to him at full speed. And, once he came out of that with the ball in hand, he probably felt pretty, happy to be alive and very pumped up, or felt like he had just come under threat. And that led to the conflict that Pham really seemed more like that was subject A. He kind of like almost caught himself like saying like it was a close play, and then he stops like, actually, it wasn't a close play at all, which now that I think about it, but it seemed like it was more of his post-game ire was really about Contreras, as much as I think the frustration of him being on a cold snap right now, 11 straight losses, and he certainly wasn't breaking the seal for the players openly disagreeing with the coaching staff in post-game, and I think that added on to it too, just the feeling like they're not being set up to win right now. I think all those are contributing factors to him pondering out loud using Muay Thai tactics on William Contreras.
Yeah, I was gonna say, what was his off-season fighting regiment, training? What style does he do? So Muay Thai.
I was literally walking in the other day, and he was like explaining it to like Darren Jackson, and it was like the fun fact about him on the scoreboard during the game today is that Tommy Pham practices like boxing and Muay Thai. I don't know if I'm pronouncing it right. There was like one other fighting style that I think was listed on it, but I can't remember. So like Merkin and other beat writers are trying to like, what was the third one? And I kept like shouting in like fake answers like regicide and taking... but we never got the actual answer about what the third thing he does. I'm sure it's extensive. He seems like an MMA fan.
Okay.
He would not be the guy I would try.
No.
I don't know who would be the major leaguer I'd try. Probably like just Tanner Banks, because he'd probably do conflict resolutions a few times before. Like, but once he got the gist of like what I was going, he could probably take me as well. So
you get one shot.
Yeah. We're gonna get to John Schriffen's call in a second here of what happened at home plate between Pham and Contreras. But Jim, it does get me wondering here, and James kind of touched on it, like, is the frustration of his poor play as of late, because Tommy Pham has been cold at the plate. He's 3 for 28 in his last 7 games. No extra base hits. Is this a reason for concern? And if he continues to struggle and you do have more losses piling up, we've always pondered since he's joined the White Sox, what would happen if Tommy Pham blew up in the clubhouse? I'm feeling that powder keg is starting to hiss a little bit.
Some bits of powder off and have some smaller explosions before a bigger one. It takes me back to the quote that he had when the White Sox were actually playing well. And he said, well, we got a tough stretch ahead. We have, we're playing like 39 games against, really good teams. So let's not get ahead of ourselves. And that almost seemed like, looking at it in hindsight, based on what happened today, almost like an attempt of self-preservation, or just like, don't get me going. Like, I'm not out of the clear yet. I know my tendencies. I know what this team isn't that good. And we're entering a stretch where if things start going the wrong way, I might, get unhappy. I may be projecting a little bit, but in hindsight, that's what it kind of looks like, is just he foreshadowed this with his assessment of this very brutal stretch of schedule, and it's certainly bearing out that way right now. It also brings me back to the conversation we had about like whether Atlanta want to trade for him, and I think we're seeing just some regression built in, some just testing a 36-year-old Tommy Pham and thinking like, well, maybe he can, maybe inside's the way to go more. Maybe just is, he's eliminating one part of the plate and we're figuring out what that is. And now we have to go hit that and have to, make him adjust and see if he actually can, or whether this is just the reason why he went unsigned for most of the season. It's just teams thinking like he's got this hole in his approach and eventually it's going to get figured out and there's nowhere to go. So we are seeing, I think, some crossroads, both with him on the White Sox and with him, having a greater part on a contending team later this year. But, he played so well out of the stretch that it's fair to expect some regression and just a stretch like this to balance it out. And Tommy Pham is like scuffling, but also like the White Sox are losing, and there's nobody certainly to take Pham's spot. There's no way to like shake up the outfield further. Like, I think you can see this just perpetuating in a way to where like the frustrations that players have or not being able to reset or kind of, get a couple of days off to try to change the way things are going. I think, you could see more of these conflicts just brew because everybody's collectively way in over their heads.
So let's go to the John Schriffen minute, and this has been passed around on social media quite a bit. Here is Schriffen's call on the collision between Tommy Pham and William Contreras.
Here's the throw to the plate. And he's out. And Contreras is barking at him. Tommy Pham's barking back. He's not backing down. He doesn't like that. And now home plate umpire Edwin Jimenez has to hold back Pham. Nah, we ain't taking that. We ain't taking that from the Brewers. I don't care how many L's we got this year. We ain't taking that.
So, Jim, I give the floor to you. You got 60 seconds. Share your thoughts about Schriffen's call.
I don't want to have the Schriffen minute anymore. Like, I always bring it up reluctantly, but it feels like if you could option a broadcaster down to AAA to work on some things, this would be kind of the opportunity, kind of like the Zach Remillard game of a broadcaster. He had a rough weekend himself. I saw, clips of Steve Stone kind of cutting him down a little bit with some very curt reactions to Schriffen's over-optimistic interpretation of events. And it kind of culminated with this call where he goes into slam ball mode of just going from 0 to all of a sudden like ripping his shirt off in the booth and like pounding his chest. And like, one, you just got here. Two, this is not the team you want to associate yourself with. Like, you don't need to tie yourself emotionally to see. Nobody is who's watching the game. Like, everybody wants as little to do with this team as possible. He's just throwing himself, basically out of the broadcast booth and onto the field and defending the honor of the White Sox as though there's any honor there. And it's just, when the clip gets passed around, and I think this is going to be the clip that gets passed around, I'm not sure if Fangraphs does the broadcast booth evaluations anymore, the scoring, but like this feels like one that's going to dog him a little bit if they do these, league-wide grades of just like the, where did this come from? Why is he this upset? And why is he talking about like, I don't care how many L's, when the White Sox are the worst team in baseball and going to continue to be the worst team in baseball. It just, it feels like totally unmoored from the experience of watching this team. And it seems like it's getting, as losses pile up, he's getting further and further away from kind of the mission of, getting, I think, further and further away from his strong suit of calling big, exciting moments. And when he's that far afield, like, I don't know what guides him back to coming up with like a gear that can help him like find his footing in this broadcast. Like, it's tough. It's uncomfortable. And while it's the toughest possible situation he could have been brought into, it's also like not the fault of listeners. You're asking a lot of the audience to put up with that. And so, it's going to be it's already a long season, but it's, I've seen more and more, comments, just, reading the reactions to, the White Sox talk accounts, highlights. And when Southside Stand Up, was first brought out, like, I thought, that's going to get a bad response, or that's going to be seen as kind of corny and over the top. And the response is pretty positive. I think by and large, kind of like Sox Fest, people want to feel good about the White Sox product. And they don't want to be mad. They don't want to, I think there are some fans who prove opposite, but I think by and large, the normal average fan wants to have a reason to tune in and follow the White Sox. And so like, this guy's excited. All right. I kind of like this. But as the season's kind of gone on and watching the comments on those clips, they are getting decided more like, what's this guy's deal? Like, this is this is not the time or the place. Somebody step in. And so, yeah, I think that's the Schriffen 3 minutes.
I just appreciate the soundbite that he gave me that I could use forever, Jim.
Nah, we ain't taking that.
Schriffen's not going to take your take on him anymore, Jim. No matter how many L's he continues to produce, he's not taking your crap anymore, Jim.
They are taking it. That's the thing. They clearly are taking it.
That's what I tweeted. In fact, Tommy Pham did take it.
And it's like when you react like that, you're not presenting what's actually happening over the course of the season. I think that's what's it's coming down to is his attempt to try to rise to these moments and like summon some pride for the team is not it's running afoul of what's actually happening on the field, and you, as a broadcaster, you can't have that happen, or like people are questioning your interpretation of events. Like you have to be rock solid on the events and contextualize it within the course of the season. And he's not doing that. And that feels like a pretty high failure on like the hierarchy of broadcaster goals or aims or necessities. Like that feels pretty high up there.
James, if there is another food day, and there will probably be another food day for the White Sox, it may give us another opportunity to chat with Brooks Boyer. And I will ask Brooks the same question I asked him in the first food day. How do you feel about John and John's calling of the games? It'd be a little bit different situation than what John did at spring training. And then before we move on with this episode and move on from the weekend, one positive thing I'm trying here, folks. Paul DeJong hit 2 homers this weekend. He leads the team with 9. That's going to be important for later in the show. And in his last 30 games, Paul DeJong has a 772 OPS. He's got 6 homers in his last 101 at-bats. And his season OPS right now is the best he's had since 2019. So James, has Paul DeJong shared, or any one of the White Sox coaching staff shared, what is working for Paul DeJong?
Yeah, a little bit. And what I wrote about him a couple weeks back, where he felt like he was popping out of his legs in his swing a lot last year, and it was changing his eye level and kind of altering his swing decisions. And he's being better about like he's kind of got this mechanical cue of like grounding his knee. I know minding it out in my living room on a podcast is not the best way to do it, but he's kind of got this cue that's keeping him a bit more grounded. It's keeping him a bit more in his crouch, and he's not kind of chasing high fastballs. He's having as good of an offensive season as I think you could hope. This was true of him in his earlier career, but certainly now that he's on the verge of 31, he's like at the absolute boundary of like major league viability in terms of like in zone contact.
What do you mean? He's leading the White Sox in position player WAR. Come on, James.
He's at the margin in terms of this one aspect of your game can't be much fringier than this and survive. Now, obviously, he makes up for that in the sense that like, and even like, talking to scouts, like he's not a like raw bat speed guy, even though like he's able to deliver a lot of pop and a lot of lift. But he's not someone who necessarily, I don't know what the StatCast tracker is up, but that's not his reputation, at least, of like, oh, he's just like super tooled up and has no approach. His approach has to be really strict because he's going to like swing and miss on like 30% of pitches in zone, which is like the highest you'll see in the majors. He doesn't have the worst strikeout rate in the majors, though he is pretty high. But he also is not going to draw a lot of walks because you can get whiffs against him in the zone. So he really like can't afford to change his eye level and start having any chase to his game because like his contact profile does not afford it. If he stays in there, he drives the ball well enough when he connects that he can give you like kind of this ugly mid-70s OPS where like the OBP might start with a 2 and it might start with a 2 and then an 8, but it's still on that borderline of viable if you provide enough power with it and you're obviously providing good shortstop defense, which he does. But it's certainly like, well, if his in zone contact rate goes any lower, like it's the one piece of like, the one little rod that's keeping up the rest of the foundation is very flimsy, and I wouldn't want to kick it any out. And I think the question is like, what will his home run total if he leads a team? But the problem is he's kind of playing his way off the roster as this, because a worse version of Paul DeJong than what we're seeing this year got traded last year, because just like a viable middle infielder who can like give you good shortstop defense and can provide anything offensively is something that like a contender dealing with injuries or just like underperformance could definitely will just slap in there and like, all right, now we don't have to worry about shortstop anymore, and we'll maybe get something at the bottom of the order. Like that's a valuable player, and that's something that, you know, he obviously provided some mystery that he could still do that with the way he finished last season. And, you know, the White Sox paid a very low price to kind of test it out and see if he could do that. And they're kind of getting the reward for it. I don't think it necessarily wipes out, you know, the Benintendi contract, but it's a nice little move. I think they've made other decisions. Like they're certainly seemingly underwater on their idea that like Clevenger provides security or stability. And, you know, there's the whole Martin Maldonado thing to work out, but that is looking a little bit like a shrewd little buy low deal at this point.
Yeah, I saw on, I can't find who told me, but DeJong was on Inside the Clubhouse on 670 The Score, and he talked about like kind of matter-of-factly how he figures if he keeps doing what he's doing, he'll be on a different team by September 1st, which I thought was really funny because like you normally would think like August 1st, but like even DeJong, like he's humble enough, or at least he's been through enough to be like, yeah, I might be a waiver claim in August. Like he's not setting that high of a bar for himself. Just like he came into the organization saying like, oh, it's a guaranteed contract, I can't complain about that. Now he's he's equally lowering the bar on the backside of this deal by saying, maybe by September, even the trade deadline won't be what gets me out of the organization necessarily. I might be somebody who just finds a home elsewhere. I do wonder just how poorly he played after the trade last year, if teams will be a little bit reluctant to acquire him with like any significant hopes, just thinking like, oh, well, all it takes is like one move to get him completely out of sorts, and, you know, like James said, be on the wrong side of that contact profile, not delivering anything of use. And, you know, hopefully, you know, given that even before the trade last year, he wasn't his best. He was okay, provide enough power to be distinguish himself a little bit, but the rest of his game was still kind of lacking. This is better than he was before the trade last year, so hopefully that would, you know, I guess, inspire teams to be more confident in DeJong doing what he's doing for a different team. But the play last year after the trades was so abysmal that, you know, it does lead me to wonder, kind of like with, you know, Pham in a certain way of just like waiting for one thing to go wrong, and all of a sudden he is completely untenable.
Well, the Chicago White Sox will continue playing games, unfortunately, this upcoming week. They visit Wrigley Field, and we will preview the upcoming series against the Chicago Cubs and also take a look around Major League Baseball after a quick word from our sponsors. This podcast episode is brought to you by Game Time. Game Time is now an authorized ticket marketplace of Major League Baseball, which makes getting tickets even faster and easier. Prices on the Game Time app actually go down the closer it gets to the first pitch. With killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their lowest price guarantee, Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying Major League Baseball tickets. And you'll definitely want to use Game Time for the White Sox next series at Wrigley Field to take advantage of all the features on the app. And while the White Sox probably won't win, it's always a good time to stop by the neighbors. You'll want to take advantage of Game Time buying tickets, especially with the flash deals. One such flash deal right now on the Game Time app is in section 29, right down the right field line, row 11 for just $161. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use our promo code Sox Machine for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and use our promo code Sox Machine for $20 off. Game Time. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed.
Whether you're a world-class athlete or a podcaster like me, we all understand the importance of mental and physical well-being and proper recovery for top-notch performance. That's why I'm excited that Unified Healing is sponsoring this podcast. Unified Healing is a new and super innovative global network of wellness centers powered by Energy Enhancement System, or EE System. If you haven't heard of the EE System, you'll want to listen up. This technology promotes wellness, deep relaxation, purification, and rejuvenation. In hundreds of locations across the globe, access to a center is easy and affordable. Interested in experiencing the EE system technology for yourself? Go to unifiedhealing.com/bluewire to learn more and find a center near you. That's unifydhealing.com/bluewire. No material or testimonials on the Unified Healing website are intended to be viewed as medical advice or a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always seek the advice of your physician or other qualified healthcare provider with any questions you may have regarding a medical condition or treatment and before undertaking a new healthcare regimen, including EE system.
Jewelry isn't a gift you give just once. It's a way to remind your loved one of a beautiful moment every time they see it. Blue Nile can help you find the gift that says how you feel and says it beautifully, with expert guidance and a wide assortment of jewelry of the highest quality at the best price. Go to BlueNile.com and experience the convenience of shopping Blue Nile, the original online jeweler since 1999. That's BlueNile.com to find the perfect jewelry gift for any occasion. BlueNile.com.
Welcome back to the Sox Machine podcast. All right, so the Chicago White Sox are in Chicago. They just head north to play against the Chicago Cubs at Wrigley Field. And boy, the Cubs are in a tough rut right now. They're 29-31. They're also below 500. They are third place in the National League Central. They're now a half game back of St. Louis. Again, I don't know how the hell that happened. The Cardinals are in second place. The Cubs are 7.5 games back of the Milwaukee Brewers. That is a big number, and we'll talk about that big number when we talk about what's happening around Major League Baseball. The Cubs are a good team at home. They're 16-13. Away, not so good. They're 13-18. They're 7-12 against the National League Central. If they do not improve their play against the division, that's going to bite them in the ass like it did last year. And they're 2-8 in their last 10 games. The probable pitchers for this series, 7:05 p.m. Central Time starts for both Tuesday and Wednesday. It's going to be Chris Flexen for the White Sox against Shota Imanaga for the Chicago Cubs, who's been excellent this year. I want to highlight that Tuesday, we are bringing back the Sox Machine watch party on playback. This has been requested a lot of questions. Are we going to do the watch parties again on playback? We are Tuesday night. You can watch the game with Jim and I along with our friends from the 108. So if you're sick and tired of John Schriffen, you can listen to us babble like Mystery Science Theater 3000 style during the game. James will be covering the game for us at Wrigley Field. Wednesday, it's Eric Fetty. He'll take the ball for the White Sox against Jamison Taillon. And James, I pose this question to you because this is what's on my mind when it comes to the Cubs. Are the Chicago Cubs bad? Like, starting pitching, their rotation, top 10 in Major League Baseball in ERA. But offensively, they have a team 679 OPS. That's 21st in Major League Baseball. So that's a bottom 10 offense. And their bullpen ERA, which I get, it's a flimsy metric, but their bullpen ERA is 4.45. That's 26th in Major League Baseball. And their bullpen is 13 for 25 in save opportunities. So is this team just playing bad baseball right now, or are the Cubs worse than I thought they would be?
They're definitely like a team that leans towards like not investing in the bullpen, which I think is like generally the way to go if you can swing it. But you know, with Azalea kind of collapsing on him and Merriweather getting hurt, it really kind of took the teeth out of their late inning mix. Like they rode those two guys incredibly hard last season, and along with Michael Fulmer, who kind of blew out on top of the fact that his contract expiring. I realized I covered them last year. I saw this happening, but I think a little bit of their depth, like they were supposed to be a kind of a good pitching development engine, but they haven't really. Their Iowa bullpen was like terrible last year and really didn't produce anybody that was like could step into and fill the void of depth. And it doesn't seem like they've had a whole crop of replacements or an org that's been largely good at developing starters and finding guys. They haven't been able to throw a ton at that situation now. And of course, with Jordan Wicks getting hurt, they had to move Ben Brown to the rotation, and Kyle Hendricks kind of falling off the cliff, like didn't help. I mean, offensively, like they didn't make they re-signed Bellinger, and that kind of became like the big move, but they didn't do a ton to like upgrade that unit in a major way. They really kind of like Christopher Morel to like take a step forward, and as much as like I feel like I like what I've seen as far as Morel's progress in terms of like plate discipline and like having good at bats. Like it hasn't turned to results just yet. And they made a bet on like Michael Busch being like really majorly ready to step in and be like a good plus first baseman, and it looked great for like 2 weeks, but it's a 35% K rate. It's hard to work around consistently. They can't all be Paul DeJong. And that on top of like Swanson getting hurt, it's just like not a ton of offensive depth with things not going to plan. Like Jan Gomes was great for them last season, but he's only 2 months younger than me. It's not like crazy that he fell off a cliff offensively, given his age and given his, miles catching. Like, I don't know where like the big bat infusion comes from other than them trading for it, which was probably going to result in them, getting rid of a pitching prospect that they would want to clutch onto. I also think like, yeah, there's fits and starts with it. There's pain, but I feel like the best, obviously they have Michael Busch too, and that complicates it a little bit first base, but I feel like the place they want to get to sooner than later is like Pete Armstrong being like a viable center fielder and kind of going back and forth with it and sending him down. I think just give him all the reps you can until it becomes like more of a league average bat, because I think that's something you can get to, and you want to get to that by the end point of the season or the second half anyway. And it seems like kind of all the fires they are having to put out has kind of made them want to like adjust the sliders and see what they could do to change, and I want to lend to them sending down. But I'm not just saying this because like PCA gave me like a 20-minute interview in Iowa and is accommodating, but probably am. Who was I going to bring up? This is way too much Cubs talk, but since I'm criticizing them, that probably is what the listeners want in some form.
Well, here's some follow-up questions I have, because I'm looking at the offensive numbers right now. So Chris Morel leads the Cubs in homers. He's got 10 homers, but he's batting 195. He's got 30 walks this year, so his on-base percentage is 307, but he's slugging just 371. The numbers that jump out to me, Dansby Swanson has a 608 OPS. He's hitting 203 with a 277 on-base percentage and slugging 331. And he had a great 2023 campaign. He's having a terrible first third of the season. And Ian Happ was a name brought up a lot for a White Sox perspective, because they could always use more left-handed bats, especially those that plays in the outfield. And Ian Happ's hitting 221 with a 328 on-base percentage, and he's slugging 377. Like, some of these core...
As a fantasy owner of Ian Happ, he's coming along of late. Talking about money.
Okay. It's just like some of the core guys that the Cubs were counting on are just not playing up to expectations. And James, covering the White Sox, we've seen this script. They should be in a better position than they are. They're not. And with the Brewers taking advantage of playing against the White Sox, the Cubs only get 2 games this week, and they get another 2 games on the south side. 4 games against the White Sox clearly is not enough to make up the ground that they have lost to the Milwaukee Brewers. And I'm a bit worried here. Like, I thought people maybe were overreacting because the Cubs had a bad week. But these offensive performances have to turn around quickly if they're going to get themselves back into the race in the National League Central.
You're looking at this all wrong. You asked earlier, you couldn't figure out why the Cardinals had taken off. We know why the Cardinals taken off. They had their come to Jesus moment.
But they lost that series.
And they're booed off the field, and it turned their season around. What the Cubs have to do is take a righteous ass kicking that will make them all contemplate what they're doing there, and that will turn their season around.
I can't imagine that. If the Cubs get swept by the White Sox, Jim is going to go on Bernstein and Holmes on Friday, and they're going to ask, how the hell did this happen? And what did the White Sox do to the Cubs? The Cubs season is over. Like, I can already get those questions and topics brought up, and poor Jim will have to fill 15 minutes to answer those questions.
Well, actually, I think I'm on Tuesday this week. If the schedule holds, I have to check in, so I won't have to answer about what the White Sox did during the series. I'll have the benefit of having no events to talk about aside from this 11-game losing streak if the schedule holds. So we'll see. I would like to see Pedro Grifol feeling himself a little bit if he sweeps the Cubs at Wrigley, just because after 11 games, he tends to, I think, he tends to look for anything that kind of validates his worldview or the fast method. And so I think, that could be the recipe for it, is getting a couple of postseason grade wins at Wrigley. The thing about the Cubs, like, it reminds me a little bit, they remind me last year of a little bit of the 2005 White Sox formula offensively, in that nobody sucked. Like, when you look at their lineup, like, they didn't have anybody who would, necessarily scare you for the last at bat of the game. Like, no linchpin of the offense, but you look up and down, like, everybody's kind of contributing. Yeah, everybody has their own little niche here. Like, even Nick Madrigal, who wasn't, good offensively, he played some decent defense. He got on base a little bit, had some hot stretches where, like, he contributed on a bench role, kind of filled in helpfully. And now he's back in Iowa this year. Like, the game has completely fallen apart on him. And it seemed like there was just a little bit too much Nick Madrigal in their lineups in May, which I think is, another one of those indicators of just how your team is functioning and what they're doing. So he's back in Iowa. I think David Bodie is up taking his place, so we'll see if that helps. But I will miss having Madrigal in a lineup against the White Sox, and just a referendum on that draft pick all over again.
Listen, Nick Madrigal was playing well in 2021. He hasn't been the same since June 9th, 2021, when he missed the rest of the season. But Nick Madrigal was serviceable for the White Sox. There was a path. There was a path of success for Nick Madrigal. He has not been able to recapture that path. And 2021 is a long time ago. That's 3 years ago for Nick Madrigal. Still dealing with his difficulties and his shortcomings, and that's not aimed to be a pun, but I guess it could be a pun in the case of Nick Madrigal. Again, you can watch the game with us Tuesday nights on playback. We'll have that link on the SoxMachine.com page. We'll start that watch party at 7 o'clock. You can watch along with us, and we'll see how the White Sox-Cubs series goes. Man, if the White Sox win any games in this series, Cubs fans are going to be irate. So it's sweep or bust from a Cubs perspective. Again, the White Sox history is on the line. The longest losing streak in club history is 13 games. And if they get swept again, for what would that be? 4 series in a row they would be swept?
Yes. This is
4.
the Super Bowl of the approach I'm talking about. Of enjoy the opposing fan base, like losing their minds, losing whenever they like lose a single game to the White Sox. The Wrigley panic would be. This is what you train for. I think if you're White Sox.
Again, we'll be recapping as far as that series in another Sox Machine podcast episode after Wednesday night between the White Sox and Cubs. That's probably going to just be Jim and I, as James will be wrapping up at Wrigley Field as the Boston Red Sox come into town for the 4-game weekend series. And then after that 4 games, the White Sox go back on the road. It's their West Coast road trip to Seattle and Arizona. But that's enough White Sox talk. Let's talk about what's happening around Major League Baseball. So as I mentioned when setting up the stage for the White Sox and Cubs, that there's quite a bit of breathing room right now between the Brewers and the Chicago Cubs. But when you look around Major League Baseball, all the division leaders have breathing room. With the exception of the American League East, every division leader has at least a 4-game lead. The New York Yankees, despite how awesome they've been, only have a 2.5-game lead over Baltimore, who is also awesome. And James, I guess I'll start with you. Like, this is a bit surprising here, and I wonder if this trend continues in which the division leaders start pulling away here, and how that impacts as far as like the trade deadline. Because if it becomes more clear that 4 teams are fighting for the last 2 wildcard spots, do you think that reduces the amount of trade activity that we see because teams just don't want to give up coveted prospects for their opportunity to be a 5th or 6th seed in the postseason?
Yeah, that's always a concern. I think teams tend to be a bit more especially now with how low the bar is for kind of being in the wild card race. You could be in the wild card race and very easily not feel like you're really in your window where you're trying to spend a lot of future resources on this season. I think like the Nats are like a game and a half back of a wild card spot right now. Like, I don't think they'd be a team that would really buy in or like give you a meaningful prospect for Tommy Pham. Maybe the Red Sox kind of feel similarly. Whereas like, but maybe a team like the Texas Rangers being kind of off to a really slow start, that's not a team that's really built to like say die or surrender in any fashion. So it could be beneficial for, if it's, the Blue Jays or the Astros, or the Blue Jays are trying to make a push to extend Bichette and Guerrero. And part of it is they have to demonstrate that they're not, packing in for a season that provides you maybe a little bit more buyers than you would anticipate. Whereas teams like, I don't know, the Tigers being closer, maybe the Red Sox, that's less helpful. So it kind of depends. It might break even, and just in general, there's a lot of prospect hugging that will probably, compared to what they were able to do in 2017 to now, a lot of that's probably just going to be landscape of the league and how prospects are valued, where it's just it doesn't feel that long ago, but you just wouldn't give up assets like Eloy Jimenez until it ceased, at least where they were prospects, not to talk about Curran Eloy and all that, for a mid-rotation starter that Jose Quintana was. Like, if you didn't think someone was like a game one playoff starter, I don't know if you'd go that deep for a package the way that even just 7 years ago, it was more commonplace.
Yeah, the Minnesota Twins have a 3.5 game lead as the 6th seed over the Boston Red Sox for the final wildcard spot in the American League. And as James pointed, it's a much tighter race in the National League. The St. Louis Cardinals would be the 6th seed in the National League if the postseason started today, and they are below 500. The Cubs, Giants, half game back. Nationals, a game and a half back. Man, CJ Abrams, that is a guy that you just build a team around, James. Diamondbacks and Pirates are 2 games back. Those are 2 teams I'm keeping an eye on. Maybe there'll be more activity in the National League for those teams that don't often go into the postseason, but it is something that's on my mind with the big division leads. The other thing that was on my mind, Jim, Aaron Judge leads the majors now with 21 homers through 61 games on June 2nd. Will anyone on the 2024 Chicago White Sox hit 21 homers for the season? And I put up a poll on Twitter, which you can follow us at Sox Machine. You can follow me at Sox Machine _Josh. 93% of the people voted no.
I was going to say 94.
Is it 94?
No, I was going to guess that. Like, if you had me guess what the percentage was, I was going to say 94.
Yeah, 93% voted no, that nobody on the White Sox would hit 21 homers. And the 7% that said yes is that they're hopeful that Paul DeJong could hit 21 homers. Jim Margulis, will anyone on the 2024 White Sox hit 21 homers?
If Paul DeJong hits 21 homers for the White Sox, either he had like a September to remember, or somebody failed to do their job in the front office, that he's able to contribute at a certain level to do that, and no other team wanted him even for a bench role. Yeah, I don't know who does that, like Luis Roberts, maybe if he gets on one of his hot streaks, but just coming off the injuries, coming off of, can't count on that. So that feels like a pretty safe no.
How about you, James? Do you think anyone hits 21 homers for the White Sox in 2024?
Oh, you said 21 homers for the White Sox, so it can't be DeJong hitting 18 and then going somewhere else.
Right.
Phrase that. I'm willing to. I'm doing the kombucha meme out loud. I would think Robert is capable, but yes, it's stacked against him in terms of like, we're talking about a guy who's starting in June. He needs to hit 19 more. He needs to stay healthy with a hip that's now betrayed him twice. He's not really looking too great in his rehab stint. It might, easily to see him like taking a week or two to really get rolling. I want to say yes. I feel like I've gone overboard on White Sox predictions pretty consistently for 2-3 years, and looking at the barrel of 11-game losing streak, maybe it's time to stop and take the under and stop my blatant homerism that clouds my every decision.
Well, speaking of pretty big and interesting decisions. My last thing, Spencer Torkelson was optioned by the Detroit Tigers. In his last 35 at-bats, the former number 1 overall pick of the 2020 MLB draft, over 35, 14 strikeouts. If Andrew Vaughn doesn't go on the injured list, I'm just saying, White Sox, I've only been pounding the drum on this for like a month and a half. You can do this. It is fine. We'll see how Torkelson handles AAA if he gets back to the majors later this season. But the Detroit Tigers have had enough. Spencer Torkelson down to AAA. James, I'll pass it back over to you. What is catching your attention around Major League Baseball?
Well, that was what I was going to use, was Torkelson, because him and Vaughn are very analogous, not just because of the draft position, but like they are from the same area. They trained under the same youth coach coming up. They were from like the same traveling team in high school. Like they're very much like are made in the same mold, in addition to both being like highly drafted right first baseman without really adding value outside of offensively. So them being kind of mediocre and inconsistent is not palatable. I will say like a crucial difference is, the Tigers are promoting Justin Henry Malloy as the corresponding move, and the White Sox obviously don't have that level of like kind of a ready corner prospect to slide into Vaughn's spot. Now there's, Henry Malloy's a third baseman, and they could easily move Colt Keith to first base or something like that. It's a way in which the playing time kind of still is being transferred from one to the other. Montgomery, Ramos, those are guys we'd probably rather see, and definitely would see them taking some share of like infield or at least middle of the order play appearances. I don't think they could directly affect Vaughn in the same way, but either way, they're not at that same level of like maturity or readiness where Detroit has kind of like this positional offensive depth where it's really hard for them. I don't know necessarily like a great path for them replacing Spencer Torkelson's production if like that doesn't come to fruition of the way they thought it would be. But they at least have more healthy options of what they would move on to than the White Sox do, which is really just like kind of shuffling through different AAA depth. Like you can give Sheets the first base reps and be kind of happy with it. And it's a somewhat similar project at this point, but it's really because you're kind of moving these guys you find off the waiver wire or who are available in the outfield corners, like Corey Julks, who obviously has been great, but is not like this organizational tentpole now.
That's a good point. Jim, how about you? What's catching your attention around Major League Baseball?
Jose Abreu homered, so a little bit of life coming back from the minors, but so far not really doing anything else to change his long-term forecast. Other thing that jumped out to me like the last week or so is Blake Snell really struggling, hurts, not giving the Giants anything, double-digit ERA. Jordan Montgomery not doing a whole lot to make a difference in Arizona. And there was talk as their candidacies and free agency, languished, and Matt Chapman, the Boris for that, does Major League Baseball need a signing deadline in order to, bring excitement back to the offseason? And that always seemed like a foolish thing to suggest for, the union. But I think we're seeing like a little bit of a maybe de facto deadline should these, struggles become instructive for somebody like Snell and Montgomery, just saying like, you can't, if you're a free agent pitcher, you can't go into late March or early April and expect to be, what you were the season before. Cause it kind of reminded me of James, what he wrote about Brian Bannister, saying like spring training was his time to shine, or at least like his ability to let loose and have a bunch of ideas and present guys with new topics, new pitches, new approaches, just to see if they work, see if there's anything there. Being able to test them out in like high intensity environments without any results really mattering. So like, when you're bringing it during 3 innings in spring training and you give up 5 runs over those 3 innings, a couple of homers, like you can just shrug that off and say, well, that didn't work, or worth trying again, see if it works. Might have to scrap it by the end of March, but at least, it's given me some insight into how I can use other pitches better, or what can replace something if I'm struggling against lefties, or if I don't have a great put away pitch. Like I think even if like the whole new pitch in spring training thing is a little bit of a trope and maybe a little bit overstated in terms of how important it is, I do think it allows pitchers to maybe think about things in a different way. Maybe, alter some grips in a slightly different way, or maybe, work with arm slot a little bit just to try to enhance the other pitches. And I think if you're Montgomery or Snell missing that period, it might be really hard to just protect, even if you're like an established pitcher. In the case of Snell, who won the Cy Young, there probably still is value for that ramp up period just to make sure that, you're not falling behind, and you're, having the kind of normal ramp up period you already do. So that's what kind of jumped out to me. And I think, even if teams do continue to lowball players who are traditionally accomplished, you might see players feel a little bit more inspired to sign earlier, realizing like it's not going to be good for me. Like that big payday, probably isn't coming in the next year if I wait till April 15th to sign.
Yeah, like 3 thoughts in response to that. Was one, the Bannister's exactly right. Like he said, it's the only time like guys are built up enough to like put what new experimental stuff into actual practice, because you're throwing it like not full effort in the off season, but also willing to try new things because like you won't get burned. Snell has had these like escalating series of like funny comments like, man, you really need spring training, and like that's actually important. But like the thing he said after the game Sunday was like, it's really important for us to get like a full spring training, and I hope teams see that. And I get from what he's saying that he didn't feel like the offers accelerated until after the point, but it's the ultimate like, wait, like who decided to hold out this long? Like, I think he's obviously responding to a real thing labor-wise about not getting the offers he wanted, but it's a little bit like the leverage is probably going to be more on you, that you're going to have to crack and like accept what you have to have a real season that you want, rather than it's really going to be on them. Like I'm betting that they're not going to adjust the way that you're thinking. And the third was that I talked to Grochet about his cutter today, and he said, I was trying out a grip with like Bannister in spring training. It was okay, but I didn't really feel great with it. But then I got a grip from Kopech on his cutter, and that's what really clicked. I was like, Kopech got his cutter grip from Bannister, right? He's like, yeah. It's like, okay, whatever the game of telephone works for where you still get the pitch that you want. I suppose it works out, but it's just the funny nature of like coaching and like grips and what cues work with field people, that he basically just heard it through Kopech and it worked better than hearing it directly from Bannister.
But that'll do it for this episode of the Sox Machine podcast. Thank you guys so much for listening. You can follow us on Twitter. We're at Sox Machine. You can follow James on Twitter and social media at JR Fegan. Highly recommend to do that, as he'll be covering the games for us again at Wrigley between the White Sox and the Cubs, and he'll be there also this weekend for the Red Sox series. You can subscribe to the Sox Machine podcast wherever you listen to podcasts, such as Spotify and Apple Music. And you can also listen to the show on our YouTube channel at youtube.com/Sox Machine. If you do listen to us on YouTube, please hit the subscribe button. We greatly appreciate it. If you enjoy our work and you want full access to all of our coverage of the Chicago White Sox, sign up at patreon.com/Sox Machine, as your Patreon support helps us send James out on the road covering the White Sox and providing additional insight and the amazing audio that we get to use in this podcast, and especially with the pregame notes to help educate you in whatever the hell is going on with this White Sox team. A historical season. Again, sign up at patreon.com/Sox Machine. Monthly plans start at $5, and you can save with an annual subscription. The Sox Machine podcast is a production of SoxMachine.com, your home for all things Chicago White Sox baseball, and part of the Blue Wire Podcast Network. Alongside Jim Margulis and James Fegan, I'm Josh Nelson. Thanks for listening and watching.
Everyone is talking about magnesium. It's all you hear about. But why? What do we know about magnesium? Well, magnesium is the #1 mineral that 75% of Americans are deficient in. If you are a woman over 35, magnesium will help you rediscover balance, energy, and vitality. Magnesium supports more than 300 enzymatic reactions in your body, including those involved in hormonal balance. From functional medicine doctors to mental well-being and female hormone experts, we all know that magnesium is the one mineral to improve all aspects of well-being and health. But which one? Magnesium Breakthrough from Bioptimizers, the trusted choice recommended by leading experts with 7 best-absorbed forms of magnesium to ensure your body receives the support it needs for overall well-being. Go to bioptimizers.com/balance today and use code BALANCE10 for 10% off. Support your journey to wellness at bioptimizers.com/balance. Magnesium Breakthrough from Bioptimizers, your foundation to optimal health and vitality.